Hello, folks, and welcome to Transformed by Birth, a podcast about the rite of passage through pregnancy, birth, and new parenthood. I'm your host, Britta Bushnell, author, mythologist, childbirth educator, and an emotional deep diver with a side of goofball. I'm so glad you're here. Today's episode takes us through the often turbulent waters of perinatal mental health. So grab whatever warm beverage keeps you company. I've got one of my staples, Earl Grey latte with some soy creamer and a shot of lavender syrup today. Or take us along for a walk or a drive and join us as we dive into the emotional landscape of becoming a parent. Before we go there, let's light our candle. If you want to join me, please do so, or just take a special breath as I light mine. I'm lighting today's candle for everyone who is currently or who has ever navigated perinatal mental health challenges. Exploring the transformation from pregnancy to parenthood as a rite of passage embraces challenges as normal aspects of the journey. Let's say it. Going through a huge life quake like having a baby rocks your world. But speaking of hardship in this way is only part of the equation, as it leaves out the reality many face of having to navigate such challenging thresholds with the added complexity of mental health conditions on board as well. In fact, pregnancy and postpartum are rife with fertile conditions for mental health disorders to take root: lack of adequate sleep, social isolation, fluctuating hormones, loneliness, navigating the unexpected, physical challenges and recovery, birth trauma. I mean, the list goes on. So while society is clapping its hands in excitement at the arrival of a new baby, many parents are suffering, wondering what's happening to me or what's wrong with me. Fortunately, in the last 25 years I've been in this field, conversations around perinatal mood and anxiety disorders, or PMADs for short, have left the quiet hallway whispered conversations and have begun being talked about more openly. And I see this as a really important shift. But I'm also not a specialist in this area. And so I need help to do this topic justice. That's one reason why I've brought my beloved colleague, Molly Nourmand, in as our guide. Let me tell you a bit about Molly. Molly is a psychotherapist specializing in the spectrum of reproductive lifespan. In other words, preconception through to parenthood. Molly and I share the same grad school, as well as a love of depth psychology, which sometimes is better understood as Jungian or archetypal psychology. And following the traumatic birth of her daughter, Molly embarked on becoming a birth scholar, including completing the advanced perinatal mental health psychotherapy training with Postpartum Support International. In 2017, which feels like it was yesterday, but is quite a while ago now, utilizing her experience as both a seasoned psychotherapist and as a survivor of perinatal depression, Molly created Life After Birth, a company whose focus is supporting parents through the transition into parenthood, and which now also mentors other clinicians who want to develop an expertise of treating perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. On a purely personal note, and I'm feeling cracked up as I say this, it was Molly who was with me when I received news of the tragic death of a beloved friend last year. And I got to feel in my body her remarkable capacity to hold space for another's profound pain. And I'm so grateful to her for showing up for me then. Molly, I've already got tears in my eyes. Welcome, and thank you for being here.
Thanks so much for having me, Britta. I'm feeling a little teary myself right now. Yeah.
Well, we like the emotional deep waters. So
yes.
Maybe we just start by going there.
For sure. Well, I wanted to share, I don't know if you know this, but the first time I got a taste of you was listening to you on a podcast. It was Ellie Noss's podcast. I'm trying to remember the name of it right now. Yeah,
Yes.
it's escaping me, but
Yeah, me
it'll
too.
come to me. It'll come to me.
It'll come back to both of us at some point.
Yes, yes. Sorry,
Uh,
Ellie. But anyways, I remember hearing your
Atomic
voice.
Moms.
Thank you. Thank
Okay,
you.
there. Now we're done. We
Thank
don't
you.
have to
I
keep holding that question.
exactly. I was hearing her voice, the voiceover of her intro, but I couldn't think of the name. Okay. So yes, I remember hearing your voice and hearing your conversation on that podcast, probably closer to when I had my daughter in 2016, 2017, when she was a baby. And I just remember being so struck by you and so drawn into everything you had to say, because at that time I had a really strong appetite for learning as much as I could about birth and beyond. And I really will always remember that conversation. So it feels full circle and kind of tender and teary just to be on your podcast right now.
Mm.
So just wanted to name that.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you. Well, it feels really meaningful to me as well. And this topic is a really important one.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one that is challenging. I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
mentioned in the intro that it feels like navigating turbulent waters.
Mm-hmm.
And when thinking about, gosh, who am I going to reach out to help engage in this conversation? It was like, oh, bingo, Molly. So I really am so glad you're here. So I'm curious,
Yes.
any response to what I shared in the intro that, or any
Yes.
clarifications or additions you want to make? Like,
Mm-hmm.
dive in there.
Okay. Okay. What came to mind when I love what you said about something to the effect of 25 years ago, talking about PMADs was a whisper, and now it's just more a part of the cultural conversation. And I was thinking of a woman who attended one of my afterbirth support circles, who's also a Pacifica grad. She wrote about her experience in one of my groups in this a psychoanalytic journal, and I'm going to try to paraphrase her quote. She said, "Being part of my group, it it was a chorus of motherhood Me Too's."
Hmm.
And if you think about the Me Too movement, like pre and post, it kind of feels similar to the conversation around PMADs, how it used to be something that no one talked about or was very shameful. And then as people started saying Me Too, um, it really helped create less shame and more conversation about it, and more kind of just like lubrication in the conversation. So that's one thing that
Yeah.
came to mind, is that the
What,
Me
what,
Too.
yeah, what difference do you think that lubrication in the conversation has made to individuals experiencing
Mm-hmm.
perinatal mood and anxiety disorders?
I think it's a game changer, because I'll speak for myself as a perinatal depression survivor. the, I'll speak for myself. There was a lot of shame for me in feeling depressed after birth, because culturally there's so much, isn't this wonderful? Oh my God, aren't you so happy? Oh my gosh, isn't this the best time of your life? Aren't you
Right?
so
I mean,
joyful?
you're just being bombarded by that message.
Yes, yes. And so to feel such a counter to that feeling, it's so isolating and so shameful. So when you're starting to hear others um, start to speak about, yeah, I had it too, then it just kind of brings you together. It just makes you feel less alone. And I feel like that's the medicine I wanted to create, based on my own experience of feeling so isolated and so ashamed post birth, of feeling really depressed. And I was like, I don't want anyone else to feel this way. If I can help it, I want to try to help as many people as possible to have this conversation. And I notice in my groups that I've been running for the past almost 8 years, I just hear this message time and time again of like, oh my gosh, it just feels so good to have others reflect my experience back to me, to not feel so alone. So I think that is what having more conversations about it and having it louder, to use
Yeah.
your kind of metaphor, helps for
Yeah,
sure.
that the element of removing some of the isolation as well as some of the stigma,
Mm-hmm.
I would imagine being really supportive
Mm-hmm.
and
Definitely.
helpful. So
Definitely.
when let's kind of back up a tiny bit and get some definitions on board so that we
Mm-hmm.
can help kind of understand and unpack, because we've got a lot of different things we're navigating here.
Mm-hmm.
There's the challenges of identity transformation that
Mm-hmm.
occurs with the rite of passage of becoming a parent. There's the struggles of learning how to be a parent, which is
Yes.
something separate from just the
Mm-hmm.
identity part. There's relationship challenges. There's all the various different kinds of challenges navigating work life, isolation, various different things. These are
Mm-hmm.
all aspects. There's also baby blues, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But then there's this other collection
Mm-hmm.
of conditions that fall into perinatal mood and anxiety disorders as kind of the umbrella.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't even fully explain or speak to what all is in that umbrella.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
help us, what are the various different things? Because it
Yes.
feels like so
Yes.
many different things. How does somebody as an individual navigate or even understand what it is that's happening for them?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. I'm so glad you're bringing this up, Britta. And I think a common question I get asked is this normal?
Mm,
You know? And I think everything you named, identity, becoming a parent, relationship changes, work, all the things. It's something that all of us go through in this rite of passage of becoming mothers. So there's that, and there's so much in that. Um, and within that, there's a lot of grief that happens of changing identities from maiden to mother, as it's often called. Um, and I think the word matrescence is, gaining a lot more awareness. Which, just to quickly define it, if you haven't heard of it, it's a great concept. It's similar to adolescence. So it's that awkward morphosis, from one entity to another, with a lot of emotional and hormonal and physical changes. Um, but it's like we do understand and accept adolescence as a very normal part of human development. So I love that matrescence is getting more light to it, because it's just kind of helps normalize this phase. So I would say, everyone goes through it to a degree. And then, to answer your question about baby blues and PMADs and kind of how to differentiate. So baby blues, which I wish it had a different name, but it doesn't.
I
um,
know.
I don't like it, but it's okay. Baby blues it affects up to 80% of birthing people, and it happens within the first 2 weeks after birth, and it resolves on its own without treatment. Yes.
Okay, so I can give you an example because I
Okay.
had baby blues.
Okay. Let's hear it.
So with my first, it was probably 3 or 4 days
Okay.
after he was born. My husband wasn't working, but he had a client who was disgruntled about something.
Mm-hmm.
And he had to get on the phone. And we were living in a 1-bedroom studio apartment at the time. So I was literally about 5 feet from where he was sitting
Mm-hmm.
on this call with a disgruntled client. And he's navigating it, no problem. He's talking to, oh, yeah, I hear you. And, da, da, da. And I burst into tears because I couldn't believe he was having to deal with this right now. And
Right.
I was just so moved and sad. And I just felt just tears pouring down my face
Mm-hmm.
over
Mm-hmm.
something that I have experienced many times
Yeah.
with him was not
Yeah.
necessarily navigating a disgruntled client, but with navigating something that he doesn't want to have to do, right?
Right.
But it touched me
Mm-hmm.
in a very particular kind of way that felt unfamiliar and
Mm-hmm.
made tears pop out.
Mm-hmm.
But it
Mm-hmm.
passed.
Yes. Yes. Oh, I love that example. And for me also, baby blues seems so normal. You know, if we're gonna, and again, I don't love the word normal, but I'm just gonna use I don't like
Right.
any of these words. It seems normal to me. You just birthed a baby, your hormones are regulating, your emotions are all over the place, you're trying to recover, you're trying to keep the tiny human alive, and like you said, kind of figure out how to become a parent. If you're choosing to and able to breastfeed, you're trying to learn that skill. Like, of course, it just makes sense. All the tears, all the uncertainty, all the, anxiety. But the difference is, and I have a personal experience for when, for me, I didn't have the baby blues. So
Mhm.
post perinatal depression, um, it will either show up as the baby blues continuing
Mhm.
or showing up after that 2 week period. Um, and because there is an overlap of symptoms with baby blues and with certain perinatal
Which
mood and
can
anxiety
also make
disorders.
it more complicated.
Exactly.
More
And
complicated to figure out and navigate
yes,
is
yes,
wait, what is this? What is this? Yeah.
for sure, for sure. And it's like you don't want to minimize it, but you don't want to magnify it too much, or you don't know. Like, should I,
Yeah.
is it just the hormones and the just had a baby, or is it something else? So it's great that we're talking about this. So I'll give myself as an example. I had an onset of symptoms 3 weeks after birth. And even though I had had a traumatic birth, I had a lot of support right after birth. I had an amazing postpartum doula whose focus was nights. So she helped um, really handhold me with how to breastfeed and how to do, I'll do all this baby care stuff hands on. And she would wake me when it was time for my daughter to breastfeed. And then she would soothe the baby, diaper her, put her back to bed. Like she was just like I said, I she was like a halfway between Yoda and Mary Poppins to me.
Sounds amazing.
I know. She was like, but like petite and would like dress in this way that felt very Star Wars and it was like a uniform. And she was kind of like a ninja and just would kind of like come in and come out. And she had this like bag that she would bring out everything known to man and just be very solution oriented.
Sounds very Yoda Mary Poppins combo to
Yes,
me. Absolutely. I can picture it. Okay.
totally.
So she helped you in those first 3 weeks.
She helped me in those first 3 weeks. And my mom was there, I think, for the first 2 or 3 weeks. I can't remember now. It's a little foggy, but my mom was in town. Um, and then for me, there was like a cliff of help being dropped off at week 3. So it feels like a direct correlation. I don't know, there's probably myriad factors, but it was like the doula left, my mom left, my husband was back to work, and I was just alone with my baby. And I was like, what the actual, you know,
Fuck. Yeah,
fuck.
you
I don't
can
know.
swear here.
Okay,
Yeah, go
okay,
ahead.
great. What the actual fuck? Okay. And so for me, the symptoms hit me like a ton of bricks 3 weeks after. So it wasn't, I didn't have the baby blues, but I just was like, whoa, this is really hard and isolating and I don't want to do this, Yeah, so it was like, yeah, for me it was the isolation and the aloneness was like a big trigger for my genetic and hormonal disposition to, coming together to have depression,
To activate that.
to
Yeah.
activate. Yeah.
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 Okay.
So yeah, so I think that's why I feel so strongly about support and community post birth, because I feel like for me that was a missing factor. Had I continued to have my mom, the doula, or my husband there, or anyone, frankly, a friend, someone, um, I I think I maybe would have prevented it or
So
mitigated it.
that community or that support can be a protective factor
Absolutely. I believe so because even though I had trauma in my birth, I was fine for 3 weeks because I just had so much hands-on support. So yes,
Okay, it can be. It's not,
it
doesn't
can
mean
be.
that it's going to
Nope.
be the panacea of,
Ex
magic wand of
exactly.
fixing, but it
Hmm.
can be a protective factor.
Yes, exactly.
So you mentioned uh, pre, uh, postnatal depression, but there's a
Yes,
lot of other things that fall under this umbrella. Can you
there
kind
are.
of speak to some of the other ones as well?
Yes, yes, absolutely. I feel like um, postpartum depression or perinatal depression,
Perinatal depression, yeah.
it it used to be called postpartum depression, but recently I was brushing up on some statistics. Um, I was training a new associate, and I was brushing up on some recent statistics in Postpartum Support International, and I noticed they renamed the categories perinatal, which encompasses
Yes.
pregnancy and thereafter. So because up to half of PMADs begin in pregnancy. So I think that's why they want to just
Yeah.
encompass the whole thing. So we may say one or the other, but we'll try to say perinatal to be more inclusive. So yes, perinatal depression tends to get the spotlight more, maybe because Brooke Shields put it on the map many moons ago. And it just kind of overshadows the other PMADs. But I will say that there is a whole anxiety umbrella of PMADs. So there's um, perinatal anxiety, which what I see mostly in my practice is it kind of manifests as what's called general anxiety in the DSM, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental
Mhm.
Disorders. That's a mouthful. It's called like generalized anxiety, where um, there's the mom tends to just be very hyper vigilant, anxious about all things, can't stop thinking, can't turn off their brain, can't stop worrying, having trouble sleeping, maybe having some insomnia. So it's just kind of like ongoing anxiety. And I think going back to the big question of what's normal, I mean, all moms are going to experience some degree of anxiety. Even if your baseline pre-baby was very not anxious, it's just like, oh my gosh, I have this
Yeah.
human to keep alive, right?
There is an activation that happens
Yeah,
of
it's a great
the,
word.
of, oh, I now feel very responsible for another human's well-being.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
that energy of, are they getting enough to eat? Are they okay? Is this normal? Those kinds of questions about our child rides in shotgun with their arrival.
Yes.
It's kind of it's a piece of that parental vibe. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I still have that
I bet.
to some
Yeah.
degree,
Yeah.
my college graduate was home recently, and when he's around, it activates more.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
he's 22, right?
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
just, there's an element of like, oh, are they okay? Are they okay? Is that all right? And is that clinical anxiety, or is that mommy worry?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And there's a
Exactly.
difference.
Exactly. And I would say the image I always think about is um, it's like an energetic umbilical cord, or just like an invisible umbilical cord that will forever connect you to your sons, even when they're in their 50s. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And that doesn't go away. And that's just, that is there's a whole book, Wisdom of Anxiety. That's like the wisdom of anxiety is it's like your little personal assistant reminding you of things like, don't forget to do that. Remember to do that, which we saw in, I watch all the kids' movies now because I have an 8-year-old, but I don't want to give too many spoilers, but in the movie Inside Out 2, it really personifies, well, Inside Out, the first one, it personifies emotions. And then Inside Out 2 is about adolescence. And not to give any spoilers, but anxiety does kind of take over.
Plays a big role in that movie.
She does. She does.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
And we
And
love
in
her.
a really great way that was, yeah, really, if you haven't seen it, I recommend it, even if you
Yes.
don't have kids yet.
Exactly.
Do
Yes.
it for yourself.
For sure. And I feel like maybe I'm being a little tangenty right now, but um, I would say in my field, um, parts work is becoming kind of the like internal family systems is what it's called more formally, but it's kind of becoming the orientation du jour. It's there's like a huge wait list to get trained with the guy who created it. But it's like I feel like that movie kind of um, explains parts work in a very layman way. You know, it kind of shows your different aspects of yourself and emotions
Yeah, as
broken down
characters.
as characters. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. And so, you know, and Dan Siegel says, name it to tame it, the famous, you know,
Yes.
neuroscientist. So, anyways, I'm digressing a little bit, but I say all this to say, you know, just to normalize anxiety, especially as a new parent, and not to minimize it. So, I would say a big differential factor between just normal new parent anxiety and clinical anxiety is level of functioning. So if your anxiety is getting in the way with your functioning, if it kind of runs amok the way it can, that's when you may, you know, need to bring in more support and find ways to manage it and tame it and embrace it because it can really you know eclipse joy and it can really I guess what's coming up for me too is rigidity around sleep schedules. I feel like I see anxiety, perinatal anxiety manifesting in that way of just
Mm,
like I can't. I'm so groundless and I can't control barely anything with this new baby, but I can try to control their sleep schedule, you know, and that's kind of how the anxiety can manifest. And I think, you know, anxiety and depression are different sides of the same coin. They're not like such cookie cutter boxes. So I
right.
know for myself, I had some anxiety postpartum as well, you know. So yes,
So
okay. I know
that's
just that.
in the anxiety. So we've touched on perinatal depression, perinatal anxiety, but there's more than that. Those are the two that are in
Yes,
the name,
exactly.
but
Yes,
there's more, right?
there are more. Yes, yes,
So
for sure.
so expand
Yes,
for us.
definitely. So, and this is where I kind of can like nerd out a little bit. So thanks for
Nerd out a little
indulging
bit,
me.
Molly. Go.
Okay. Okay. So I'm getting warm. I'm getting warm as I'm nerding out. Um,
I love it.
so, okay. So that's kind of the perinatal anxiety. That's, I kind of described the more general, but then under that big umbrella of anxiety is also postpartum obsessive compulsive disorder. So, kind of in the general, you know, pop psychology world, I think people think being OCD is when you like things really tidy and color coordinated. It's not. It's a really serious mental health condition that can rear its ugly head in postpartum. And I have chills as I'm talking about it because I've treated folks who have postpartum OCD, and it really affected their ability to function and take care of their baby. Because what happens with postpartum OCD is it can really grip you in a different way than kind of that generalized anxiety. Um, it can there really can be stories that you're telling yourself that you have to do certain rituals to counter something. A lot of times it has to do with health. And so the moms will often have to do these like really rigorous hand washing or body washing rituals to kind of counter it. So it's very severe. And I've witnessed mothers, you know, have their baby cry and not be able to take care of them because they have to finish a certain ritual because they're trying to protect their baby from something.
Right.
So it's like
Right.
it's serious, you know, and
Mhm.
it often we're talking about prevention and treatment too. It can also be kind of tamed with therapy and medication.
Mhm.
And I know medication is a tricky topic in this kind of stage of our lives. I know I was resistant to it. I was afraid that there would be trace amounts in the breast milk getting to my daughter. So I opted not to do medication post birth. But now that I've been in this field, um, and I'm kind of like look back at my myself, and I'm like, oh, why didn't you do it?
Yeah.
It would have. What
The
were you
woulda,
holding out
coulda,
for?
shouldas. The
I
woulda,
know,
coulda,
right?
shouldas that come out. Yeah.
Right.
But
So
the
yeah.
importance or there isn't I've witnessed this with people that I have in my own life who have navigated mental health challenges, that there's no gold medal for quote unquote toughing it out and
Hmm.
not utilizing the pharmacology that is available,
Yep.
especially when a lot of what we're talking about, and this makes me think of some of the ways that the stigma still exists around mental health, is that we're talking about like the chemical imbalance in the brain.
Yep.
And if we had a chemical imbalance in the pancreas
Yeah.
where it doesn't make insulin properly,
Hmm.
which I have in my family line, it's you're not going to be like, "Ugh, you really shouldn't use insulin.
Right. Right.
You really shouldn't use insulin." So
Yeah.
there's this, we have an understanding, oh, that part of our biology isn't lining up in a way that is creating insulin, so let's supplement insulin.
Hmm. Hmm.
In mental in brain chemistry,
Yeah.
if we're not getting certain chemicals to help the brain wire,
Hmm.
why is there stigma to add the things that can help those neurotransmitters work, and the
Hmm.
various different things? I think
Yeah.
it's a place that still has some work to go, some distance to travel
Yes. Yes.
in coming into are there ways we can support ourselves with support, meditation, movement, physical
Yeah.
activity, community, all those? Yes. And
Right.
might you still need psychopharmacology? You
Hmm.
might.
Yep. Yep. Definitely. Yeah. And so I'm glad you're saying all this, Britta. And I think, you and I both, another Venn diagram we have is we both come from a yoga background. I think when I became a mother, I was much more in the holistic world. And not that I'm not now, but I just I see the value of Eastern and Western not medication, just Eastern and Western
Yeah.
medicine. You know what I
Yes.
mean? So I think
Yes.
there's a time and a place for it. So so yes, I will say too, just to kind of go back to a little more of
Yeah.
the anxiety
keep
umbrella. Yeah.
keep us on track here,
Okay.
Molly, because
I
we're two women following threads
will.
here, so we got to keep
Totally.
weaving. So yes, we're under
Totally.
the umbrella. We're
We're
under
under
the
the umbrella.
umbrella of PMADS. What else have we
We
got
are.
under there?
We're back under the umbrella. Okay, so I will say, um, I'm going to share some. I'm going to share something that is a little bit darker. So I just want to say, if you're listening to this with kids in the car, or just have a sensitive nervous system, just kind of give you a little heads up, a little disclaimer. So um, postpartum OCD and postpartum psychosis are very different things, but I want to talk about one thing that they have in common that is actually in common but very different. Psychosis is not technically under the anxiety umbrella. So I apologize jumping around, but I did want to talk about that for a second, and then I'll go back to some other things under the umbrella. So with postpartum OCD, sometimes what can happen is um, the birthing person will get images of the baby being harmed, like what would happen if that knife, you know, hurt the baby, or what would happen if I dropped the baby, or what would happen. They have these images of baby being hurt or harmed. However, what happens with OCD is it's what's called ego dystonic. So it means when they have these images, they're horrified. They're like, oh my God, I can't believe I just thought that. But they can't get it out of their head. They can't get these images out of their head. Um, and oftentimes then there's a compensatory behavior that's needed to try to like scratch the itch.
Or soothe that worry.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Which it actually, that's a whole nother tangent, but sometimes trying to scratch the itch makes it still itchy. So it's kind of a dog chasing its tail thing. Anyways, so the
Yes.
difference between OCD and psychosis. So what happens with psychosis? Psychosis is a psychotic break, like having a break from reality. It's very serious, and it can be very dangerous. And what happens with psychosis is if the mother will have images of the baby being harmed, but it's egosyntonic. So, which means that what happens with psychosis sometimes is they do kill their babies. And the reasoning behind it is because when they have the image in their head of it, it's coming from a protective place. So oftentimes they'll be taken over by a psychosis, and they think in their minds, by killing the baby, I'm protecting it. Sometimes, for example, it can have like a religious overtone to it, like if I don't kill my baby, they're going to go to hell, or like there's certain things that can happen. So I just wanted to clarify the difference
that are
between
not
those
based in
images.
reality because there has been a psychotic break.
Exactly, exactly. And I will say, on the news, we hear of horrible cases of postpartum psychosis that have ended, fatally for the baby and sometimes the mom too. However, I have heard where you had spoke about us spending time when you lost your friend, you lost your friend. We were at a fabulous conference with Maternal Mental Health Now, which is like one of my favorite organizations. And I've heard people speak, survivors of postpartum psychosis speak. So, it can be treated, and
Yes.
and then that's like that's the overarching message of PMADs is they can be temporary and they are treatable. So that's the good news. So I know I just took you down a dark
I've had clients who have been hospitalized for perinatal psychosis and who are thriving parents now.
Yes,
But
for sure.
were hospitalized for a period of time getting treatment.
Yep,
Getting
for sure.
help.
And it is out there, and we can maybe get into later, like, kind of like warning signs and how to mobilize your system and try to prevent or mitigate. Okay, so we'll spend a little more time on the umbrella, then we'll move on. So I think another important thing to underscore in PMADS is post-traumatic or like PTSD in the postpartum world. So, post-traumatic stress disorder kind of came onto the map as we know it with soldiers returning from war. So that's kind of how we first learned about PTSD. But it's so broad, and there's what's often called big T and little t trauma and everything in between. And one of the phrases I like about trauma, I don't know the source right now, but they say trauma is in the eye of the beholder. So if it feels traumatic to you, then it was traumatic. So you and I, Britta, we could have experienced the same trauma. You and I could have very different reactions to it. Maybe you had no traumatic symptoms and I had a lot of traumatic symptoms. It's just like, it's again, the interplay of genetics and environment and things that can happen. So, I work a lot with birth trauma, and kind of going back to that conversation of what's normal. I see a lot of folks who've had traumatic births, but they don't meet the criteria for PTSD, which, without going into all this clinical, stuff, a lot of it can manifest as like flashbacks and nightmares and hypervigilance and kind of not wanting to go back to the scene of the crime, so to speak, kind of an aversion to where it all happened, which I see if folks have to go back to the hospital they delivered for whatever reason, let's say their baby's still at the NICU, like there can be an aversion to the space. So, PTSD can be very serious, but I've ushered folks through recovering from it. And I think of a woman now who had a horrible situation where she was in the ICU, the baby was in the NICU, just a horrible story. And she went on to have a second child and had a very corrective experience, had a really wonderful birth. And, I'd like to think part of it was it helped her to like process the trauma before she went into the second birth. Because the thing with trauma is, it needs to be cleared. It lives in our bodies. And, some people may, if they have a traumatic birth the first time, they may elect not to do it try, for a second or more children. But if they want a bigger family, I don't want that to be a reason that they don't go on to have more children.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that we definitely see in our world trauma showing up from birth.
Yes. Yes.
Um, and even for some folks, if we pull back even further, there can be threads of trauma in the trying to conceive, the preconception and the
Yes.
journey there, or
Absolutely.
through a really rough pregnancy. Like it
Hmm.
isn't, we've put a lot of our focus in this conversation on the immediate postpartum period, and as you shared, the perinatal period really helps. Let's keep expanding that to
Yes.
understand that these can show up in a lot of different parts of that journey.
So I'm so glad you're saying this, Britta. And I think um, going back to Postpartum Support International and their definitions, they do say in parentheses, I misspoke earlier, but they do say perinatal can also include pregnancy loss. So it's pregnancy loss, pregnancy, birth thereafter. So I think we're seeing. I mean, I'm seeing a lot of that. I'm sure you are too. Of with more and more technology around reproductive assistance, we're seeing, a whole world opening up of possibilities for parents who are having trouble getting pregnant or having children older.
Right.
Um, and with that, unfortunately, we see a lot of loss and a lot of grief, and which can compound things. So I'm glad you're
Yeah.
sharing this. I think it's important.
I I I appreciate you speaking about the word grief, because I
Yes.
do think that that is, you spoke about it early on, even around the conversation of the transition into parenthood for those who don't have a clinical experience of mental health disorder or of a
Hmm.
PMAD, but may still experience grief.
Yes.
That
Yes.
the normalization of grief in an overculture that is kind of shiny and speaking about let's be happy, you have a healthy baby, and
Yeah.
even coming back to sort of some of the conversation about birth trauma, the tendency to placate or minimize the experience of the birthing parent who may have experienced birth trauma with the pat on the back, they're there now, at least you have a healthy baby.
Yeah.
That is so minimizing
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
of, and can set a parent up for, oh, what is wrong with me that I'm actually grieving the loss of what I wanted
Mm-hmm.
while I'm holding a healthy child,
Yes. Yes.
or they're thriving but needing extra support in the NICU, or
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is, that dance of splitting off, the bifurcation that happens in the overculture that says you can only have one experience at a time. You can
Mm-hmm.
either be happy or sad, but you can't possibly be both at the same time, which is just
Right.
so mind-blowing to me and really sets parents up for extra hardship in
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
in this journey. Because if there is ever a time where it's a plurality of experiences, it's this journey.
Mm-hmm. 100%.
There's a
Yes.
lot of possibilities. You can be clinically depressed while simultaneously really glad you have a baby.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And one doesn't preclude necessarily the other.
Mm-hmm.
And that is part of where I think some of the stigmas show up as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. It's just
Definitely.
so you and I know, could talk and talk and talk and talk because we've done some of that, but I want
Yes.
to make sure that, well, first, is there anything else you want to address under the umbrella before we go into some of talking about some of the things that can be helpful?
Sure. I can quickly touch on
Yes.
two things and then we'll move on. I will say, I will say, bipolar disorder. Um, this is a really shocking statistic, but 50% of um, women get a diagnosis of bipolar in the period. I was like shocked by that.
Of those who have a diagnosis, their diagnosis is during that time, or 50% of all women?
50, okay, let me try to say this. 50% of folks who get diagnosed with bipolar disorder get it during the perinatal period,
Wow.
right? I thought that was like shocking, but then not. I
Wow.
don't know.
But
Yeah,
also not. Yeah.
right,
Yes.
right.
Okay.
So I thought, and bipolar disorder, really quick, is just like extreme highs and extreme lows. So either mania or hypomania and depression to kind of meet the criteria for both. And that's another mental health disorder that really can benefit from medication and therapy. And of course, all the other things too, but it's, it's one of those. And then also the other one I wanted to mention, I know I'm jumping around in and out of the umbrella, doesn't matter. Panic disorder was the other one I wanted to
Mm.
mention, which is part of anxiety and is marked by panic attacks, um, which are no fun, but can be treated and help. So those are just some other ones I wanted to pepper in that are kind of out of the range of just the normal
Yeah.
transition into parenthood.
But in but fall under this umbrella that can that sometimes doesn't feel like it says enough about what are those possibilities. And
Hmm.
when we are talking about these conditions in regard to perinatal, what is there an end point where it's
Mm,
no longer considered perinatal? Like
yeah,
what is the current, because that has changed as well. So
yeah,
I'm like, what's the current statement about that? Do
yeah.
you
I
know?
ki- I kind of feel I kind of feel a little internal eye roll because it's
Yeah,
like
right. I know.
I I feel, yeah, I feel like the school that you and I both went to, Pacifica, um it we had to kind of learn all of these disorders and diagnoses and everything in the DSM, and kind of have a different lens. So it's like you have to know the rules, you have to know the game. But as we're having this conversation, I'm just thinking of like culturally and across time, how did people define these symptoms and how did
Yeah.
they make sense of them? And we're talking about it in a very kind of clinical Western boxes today. Well, not just that, but I'm kind of just, you know,
Hmm.
helping with the definitions to kind of see where's the range of normal. Um, so yeah, I have a little internal eye roll about that in general about diagnoses and labels and stuff. Um, I will say, to answer your question, I believe it's the perinatal period in terms of these being perinatal.
Definitions.
Definition
Yes.
is a year after birth. You
Right.
know,
And
I
yet you and I know, which is speaking to the other part of what you were saying, that the transition and all that comes with it certainly doesn't pay attention to a calendar,
right. Yes,
that
totally.
it's more experiential, personal,
Yes.
and chaotic and wild and untamed in a way that doesn't fit that overculture Western put it in a box kind of thing.
Definitely. And I love your labyrinth metaphor. I reference it. And for those of you, I try not to botch it, Britta, but for those of you who don't know Britta's labyrinth metaphor, to my understanding of it, she talks about when you're pregnant, it's like walking into the center of the labyrinth. And when you're postpartum, it's getting out of the labyrinth, and that everyone's time and path is different getting out of the
Yeah.
labyrinth and getting in, frankly.
And the twists and turns are not all the same, but the
Exactly.
likelihood that you will face them is there. You
Yes.
will face turns. It's just not
Yes.
knowing which ones
Yep.
they will be or when they will be. And
Yep.
I actually need to just give a shout out to one of my mentors, Pam
Okay.
England, who introduced
Oh.
me to the labyrinth. And
Mm-hmm.
I have
Mm-hmm.
continued to use that symbol that has been really impactful to me in my own
Yeah.
life and journey, but
Mm-hmm.
was really introduced to me by Pam. So,
Mm-hmm.
just making sure we
Yes.
acknowledge and stand on the shoulders of those who come before us.
Exactly. I was
It's
thinking the
so
same thing.
important.
Everyone's
Yes.
shoulders that we're
We're all,
standing on.
although I don't always love that image either. It's like, I don't want to be standing on your shoulders, man. It's just heavy, but,
I know. Totally. Totally.
but
Yes.
lifting each other up and continuing to acknowledge our teachers matters
Yes.
to me.
Yes.
So,
For sure.
yes.
Definitely. Mm-hmm.
So, okay. All of these things we've spoken, and I
Okay.
love that you just brought us into a wider lens view that brings us out of the uber clinical
Mm-hmm.
and the uber Western kind of uh, cultural linear way of looking at things, because I
Mm-hmm.
think that pulling back is actually helpful when we start to talk about protective or supportive things that can be done
Mm-hmm.
through the entire rite of passage of the perinatal period to
Mm-hmm.
support us in what's happening, to
Mm-hmm.
support our mental health, to support our brain chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
Not always, but that there are some things that can be protective
Mm-hmm.
and or helpful if they do show up. We mentioned meds, we mentioned therapy,
Mm-hmm.
we mentioned support, like actual people to support. I'm going
Yeah.
to let you roll. What are the
Yes.
other things that can
Yes.
actually be really supportive and helpful?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I would say sisterhood and having that, I know it's like an overused term, but just having like the proverbial village.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I think we're all just longing for the mother and the sister and the aunt and the cousin and the neighbor just to kind of be with us. And we don't
Yeah.
have that. Or
No,
I don't have that.
I find there's a fair bit of grief
Mm-hmm.
that shows up around that, just to speak of grief again, but
Yeah.
and a frustration that shows up as well when it's like I almost can hear listeners being like, I know,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
I know, I've heard, I need a village. Where the
Yes.
fuck's the village?
I
You
know.
know?
I know. Yeah. Yeah. No,
And
totally.
so it's like we can say you need a village, the village will
Yes.
be protective, but then
Yes.
how do we find a village?
Exactly. Yes. Yes. So I'll give some tips that I
Oh, give
found
us some
helpful.
tips.
Okay,
Yes.
okay, for sure. So basically, I mean, I alluded to this before, and I'm not saying my groups are the end all be all, but in my little world, I created what I wish I would have had. So post pandemic, um, well, pre-pandemic, I created an in-person support circle for new moms within that first year of parenthood. I was longing for honest conversations, a deeper dive into all things identity, relationship, sexuality, body, friendship, career, everything. And I'm sure there's a range of different types of mommy and me groups, but I wasn't getting that in the mommy and me groups that I went to. I'm not saying they're not great because you meet people, you get out of the house,
Right.
you learn things. But I was just wanting more of just that like sisterhood. So and kind of what I created, which is different than traditional mommy and me groups, is women within that first year of motherhood. So it's not just everyone who had babies within 2 weeks apart, because I
Right.
find there's value in that you're like at the same exact stages, and it's cool that your kids are the same exact age, but you're all kind of deer in headlights. Whereas if you have a few of you, but then you have others who are like a few weeks further, a few months further, or even closer to that year mark, you can kind of, the older ones can, not older, but the
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
sophomoric ones can say, oh, I know, I was so depressed and I had the worst time nursing. I trust me, it gets better. Here's some
Mhm.
tips. And then the one giving that advice can feel like, oh, wow, I used to be there, but now I'm
Right.
here. And then
Look
suddenly
how
they kind
far
of,
I've come. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
There's
So
value for both parties.
for sure, for sure. So now I do my groups currently virtual. And so, in person's the best. I can't compete with that. But like virtual is convenient for moms to jump on, and they don't have to be
It's
in West
easier to
LA.
be there. Yeah,
It
it's
is. It
easier
is.
to be there than to put a kid in a car and drive and think about
Exactly.
naps and the food and the this and the that. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I mean, the medicine's still there in virtual. And so yeah, so that's one way is like, really finding a group. If it's not my group, finding a
Yeah.
local group in your area, or kind of search for something. If that feels like too much work, or it just isn't happening in your area, I think you and I both love ritual. I think the ritual of going to the same place every day and not having to think about it really helps. For me, that was a local park. I live off of Coldwater Canyon, not drivable, very isolating potentially, but I had a 3-minute drive to a great park. I would go every afternoon with my daughter. And for me, that became just such salve for my loneliness and my desire for some kind of community. I started seeing the same babies, the same nannies, the same moms, the same dads. And I planted seeds there that later in life, my daughter's 8 now, like I'll be like, oh my gosh, Oscar, we used to hang out at the park with you and your nanny. Like it's so cool. And the park for me became like my cheers. Like everyone was like,
Yeah.
Molly, Bijou, that's my daughter's name. Like it was like really just nice. And I met some amazing mom friends there just organically. So that for me, I didn't have like a group that I was really so into, but that was great for me. Or if you don't have a park that's like nice near you, like finding a local coffee shop that you just frequent every day, then
Yes,
right?
I love this. I love both the ritual part. And then also, I'll say that I got a little outside of myself when I was in that early postpartum period, in that I would see somebody with a baby and I became bold in a way that I would not
Yes,
necessarily do like in other
totally.
parts of my life. And I'd be like, hi, oh, you have a baby too. Look, here, I have a baby too. Hi, what's your name? And I
Totally.
would be like, do you want to be friends? Like,
Yes.
because I wanted community.
Yes.
And so, whether that was in the coffee shop or the library or at the park
Library is great too.
or,
Mm-hmm.
wherever it was, it's like starting to actually let myself speak to the longing for friendship.
Yes.
And
Yes, for
that in
sure.
itself was like, oh, a little scary. And one of the things I did was I would actually say to them, do you know if there's a baby group? Do you know where there's a this? So that
Yes.
it would be like I was making a request,
Yeah.
and pretty soon I had sort of accosted enough people in my community that I was looking for a baby group, that one of them actually, who I'd given a phone number to, called me and said, hey, I heard Sue has started a baby group. And you said you were interested in one. Why don't you call Sue? And I was
Yeah.
like, great. I'm
Mhm.
going to
Yeah.
call Sue. And
Yeah.
and then that slowly various different people started joining this baby group, and
Yeah.
it was self-structured. There wasn't a whatever, and our kids grew up together.
Mm. Amazing.
But it
Yes.
wasn't
Oh,
that it wasn't that it came knocking at my door.
exactly.
I had to keep going out and asking for it.
Exactly. Same. I definitely I was just say I would just go up to someone, and my kind of icebreaker was, how old's your baby? Like I would just, and
Yeah.
go right in there. And even if
Yeah.
I'm like a bubbly introvert, but I'm a little more like introvert leaning, but I was felt I had to be extroverted, and in early parenthood, and I still have to be it now because otherwise it just the choice is just being more isolated, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So what else?
Okay.
So the
Okay.
village.
Yes.
We could go
Yes.
down a village rabbit hole, which apparently we just did. So what
Totally.
else?
Okay. What else? I would say, ideally, while you're pregnant, I know there's like so much admin while you're pregnant and it's very overwhelming. For me, it can be overwhelming. Um, I would say as many practitioners that you can connect with ahead of time, the better, because you're not going to click with everyone. And if you have a history of any kind of mental health disorder, if you have a history of PMS or I think it's PMDD, like any kind of like sensitivity to hormonal changes, if you've had a fertility journey, um, these are risk factors for getting PMADs. Even if you don't have these risk factors, it wouldn't behoove you to, connect with practitioners ahead of time, because when the shit hits the fan, when you have a baby, you're not going to have the time and the capacity. You don't know
Right.
how you're going to feel, how you're going to be functioning to do all this stuff. So
To find somebody, you want
exactly.
you want to reduce the hardship of getting support.
Exactly.
So like preemptively
Yes.
create your roster so you
Correct.
know where to go to get
Yes.
the support you need. So
Exactly.
who are
Yes.
those practitioners you mean?
Yes. Yes. Well, I would say, I'll start with therapy because I'm not saying I'm the end all be all. I
But
really believe
that's
in
your
the
wheelhouse.
pie, but it's my
Yes.
wheelhouse. So I will advocate for um, uh, connecting with a therapist, because, like I said, PMADs can develop in pregnancy too. It can be helpful, and with postpartum planning and everything too. Yeah, to find a therapist that you connect with, because I get a lot of SOS emails and calls postpartum, and people are like, "Do you take insurance? Do you have an opening?" And it's like a lot of times I'm like, "No, I don't take insurance. No, I don't have an opening right now," and it's like I feel terrible, and I try to direct them to proper outlets. But if you can do a little bit out ahead of time, if you're trying to use insurance, do the annoying thing, make the calls, or find a sliding scale therapist, or I know, like, myself and my associates, we take like FSA and HSA cards, and we provide
Mm-hmm.
super bills so you can get potential reimbursement for out of network. So do all that legwork ahead of time, because when you're not feeling good postpartum, you're not going to have the capacity. You want to set yourself up for success, and you could offload some of this to your partner, or you guys could
Mm-hmm.
be a
Right.
team about it.
Some of the legwork part.
Some of
Yeah.
the legwork, and then just sticking with the mental health piece before I go on to some of the other branches. I wanted to mention this earlier, but I forgot. I'm a big fan of reproductive psychiatrists. So they have a specialty in um, the whole umbrella of like preconception through parenthood. They really are specialists in um, hormonal shifts for women, and they know a lot about the research and the medication that's safe for pregnancy and breastfeeding. So I would say reproductive psychiatrists are great to connect with if you're worried about PMADs, or you have a history, of mental health stuff, or you're experiencing staph pregnancy. Definitely, connect with someone ahead of time, get all that admin out of the way. And then I think, the biggest things I hear about that first year post birth and I experience is like sleep and feeding. It's like we're just primally wired to like want our babies to eat and sleep, and us, we need to eat and sleep too. So I would
Yes.
say
We are
you,
animals.
we are and mammals, and
Mm-hmm.
I would say if you are able to breastfeed and you choose um, to connect with a lactation person ahead of time. A lot of them take insurance. You can, and all these practitioners I'm mentioning, I think most, if not all, do like complimentary consults, and just to make sure if you like connect with them, you like their vibe. Again, it's like you just have to vet some people and connect ahead of time. So lactation's huge. And sleep, you may want to connect with like a sleep consultant, because you may want to just kind of get some things in a row beforehand, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's
To
important.
support the sleep. Yeah, in
Yes,
one way
for
or another, in line with your values and beliefs about sleep, so that you have that ahead of time. I love
for
that.
sure. For
One of
sure.
the things that I find that people are sometimes surprised about is that it can be tricky to get diagnosed, because you go from seeing your care provider so frequently during pregnancy to your checkup at 6 weeks, bye bye. And
Yes.
now you're seeing a pediatrician,
Yeah.
and your pediatricians should be trained in identifying PMADs,
Yep.
because
Yep.
they are the doctors who are seeing the dyadic unit.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not, they're looking at the baby.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it can be tricky to even know what it is that's going on. And it's one of the places where partners can also be really helpful. And I know that
Yes.
uh, Postpartum Support International has a great page for helping to understand, like, what are the symptoms and what is this, and
Yes.
all of that. And one of the things which bringing up partners makes me realize, partners are susceptible to
Yes.
perinatal mood disorders as well, which
Definitely.
is something that is also not talked about, and is
Yeah.
still kind of stigmatized in an unfortunate way.
Yep. Definitely. Definitely. Yes. Okay. I want to touch on that and also go back really quick to the kind of
Yes,
prevention,
go for it, please.
like call it postpartum planning or preferences, whatever
Mhm.
you want. In addition to connecting with some of those top practitioners, there's like myriad other ones, but I won't go to every single person. But I would also say discussing with your partner, if you have one ahead of time, about maternity leave, paternity leave, who's doing the night feedings, like how are we figuring out self-care, what's our support system look like, what resources, if any, can we allocate to these support people, what family members can we bring in, to have these uncomfortable conversations ahead of time, not, you know 2 days post birth when you're like recovering and you're all
Yeah.
tired and you're like, so yes, if you can have these conversations ahead of time, great. And what else was I going to say? Oh yes, and yes, fathers or like the support person, they the statistic recently as of 2025, 1 in 10 fathers get PMADs, whereas 1 in 5 mothers do. But 1 in 10 is still a pretty big figure,
It
you know.
is.
Yeah, and it is, like you said, there is the stigma, and there's still, paternity leave is still kind of, I mean, way less fleshed out than maternity.
Mhm. Yeah,
So, and
absolutely.
but yet we're seeing statistics of like millennial and now Gen Z dads being much more involved than previous generations. So, these conversations are important to have, and there is support, and um
Yeah.
so yes.
Oh gosh.
I
Okay.
know.
I knew this was going to happen, but you
Me
and I
too.
have just talked and talked and talked, and I don't feel close to done.
Me either. I know.
So there's that. And we have to start wrapping up.
I know. I know.
So I want to just ask, are there any last, anything else you want to make sure that our listeners know before,
Hmm.
we wrap up? And also, can you share where folks can find you and what your offerings are?
Okay, sounds good. Um, let's see. So I will say just what one of the North Stars for me as a mother and a clinician has been spirituality, and Buddhism has been huge for me. I feel like even if you're not into Buddhism, um, my favorite book of all time on parenting is called Buddhism for Mothers.
Hmm.
And I'm like afraid it's going to go out of print. I like worry every day because it's like I just want to like buy up all the books. You can get it on Audible too, of course, but it's not the same as like holding a book. But that book really was a game changer for me as a parent because, in short, it reframes motherhood as a spiritual practice and talks about how motherhood itself can be a meditation. And, as we touched on, you and I have our yoga background of teaching and practicing, and that's really been a grounding foundation for me, just to kind of, the endless things, like you said, with your 22-year-old, you're still worrying about him, especially when he's in your orbit. And, I have an 8-year-old, and the worry is there's no end in sight for that,
Right.
as she's in the throes of not middle school,
Yes.
but just grade school. And so I just go back again to my roots of, spirituality, meditation, Buddhism. I just feel like that. And if that doesn't resonate with you, if you have other spiritual practices or religious practices or rituals, like, I just feel like that's really anchored me. So I just wanted
And
to
they
kind
can
of
be
share.
protective too.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes, definitely. And I think some, I see some religious communities really thriving in parenthood. They have some really great setups for ritual, Um, and so that's huge. And then in terms of where to find me and offerings, um, you can find me on Instagram if you're on social media. If you're taking a break, I get it. But we all kind of come back at some
What
time.
what are your
So,
handles?
oh, my handle is lifeafterbirth_LA. You can also find me and my associates. My website is ourlifeafterbirth.com, OUR lifeafterbirth.com. And I would say, offerings wise, I work one-on-one and do groups. And my associates do one-on-one and couples. Um, and yeah, I think I'll just keep it at that. I won't overwhelm you with
Okay.
too much more information. You
And
can,
all of that will be in the show notes as well,
yes,
folks. So, as well as some, Molly, maybe you can share with us some links for where folks can go on PSI's website
yes,
if they're looking for some support in their neighborhood or in regard to what it is that they're doing. Postpartum Support International is a great resource for that.
yes.
So,
Mhm.
as we begin to bring our conversation to a close, I like to end with one question. So, that question is, what's one thing you feel passionately about that you want new or expectant parents to see, feel, hear, or know during this profound period of their lives that maybe isn't, the big flashing light that everybody always
Mhm.
talks about? Is there,
Yeah,
I know it's
yeah,
hard to bring it
yeah,
down to one.
yeah. Okay.
What's on your mind today about this?
Yes, yes. I will say, when you're in the thick of grieving your old identity, I would say just know, I would argue there's a better version of yourself on the other side of it.
Hmm.
And I will say, I was recently in Paris with my family. We were there for a wedding, and I'm in my early to mid 40s. And the last two times I was there, I was in my early and late 20s, and I wasn't a mom yet. And I was just like, I really like this version of myself better than my last two times I was here. I was just kind of reflecting. And I think motherhood has a lot to do with it. And I think aging has a lot to do with it. Um, but it's definitely, like any other kind of rite of passage or spiritual quest, it's it's not pretty when you're in the throes of the muck, as you know. But it's I think it's really good on the other side. It's even better. So I would just say the best is yet to
Yes.
come if you're in
Yes.
if you're in the muck, or in the goo, as you would say, Britta,
Yeah.
of the metamorphosis. It's better on the other side.
Oh, beautiful. If you're
Mhm.
in the muck, keep mucking
Whew.
because you're rebuilding and
Mhm.
reforming, and wings
Yes.
are being built. And on the other side, you get to fly. Yeah. Thank you
Mhm.
so much, Molly. This has been such a rich conversation. We could have kept going.
Yeah.
I really appreciate being with you. Thank you, listeners, for sharing this time with us. If something shared today impacted, supported, or moved you, please share this episode with a friend. I produce this podcast myself, and your support makes it possible. To show a little love for the podcast and these conversations, please follow, rate, and review. If you'd like to continue the conversation, please join us on Instagram at Transformed by Birth. I look forward to being with you again on the next episode of Transformed by Birth. Now, let's gather what we want to take with us from this episode and draw it in on an inhale. Grab your candle, and on an exhale, let's blow it out. Until next time, bye, friends.